Hello everyone, today it is the 8th of May, it is the evening. Hopefully this time I will not cough away. Unfortunately I have a 100-day cough still. It's not COVID, I tested myself, but yeah, it was quite annoying that I had to cough during the recording of the video. Now today I'd like to introduce my concept of fairness in taxation. Recently, after the IRD released a very controversial to the least, ridiculous to the most report about the wealthiest families' taxation, I feel it is necessary to clarify fairness. Now, if anyone is interested in values philosophies, I recommend the writings of Kant and Hegel, and from those writings it is clear that when we have an idea we cannot reach it precisely. We can approach it, therefore it is always approximative, but fairness is not possible to realize. There will be fairer and fairer solutions later on. However, there are broad terms in which we can understand fairness. Well, fairness comes from the definition and the role of taxation. What is the role of taxation? Yes, I already said in another video that actually there are three roles of taxation. One is to influence the economy in terms of production. Normally this was customs and tariffs to protect industry within a country. Most of these are already cancelled out because globalization made governments realize that comparative advantages are realized only when tariffs don't exist. Now, the second role of taxation is to influence consumption. This is where the fuel excise tax might come into play to reduce diesel or petrol usage, or the excise tax on tobacco and alcohol products. Those are to disincentivize people from consumption. Fair enough. Yes. Now the third role of taxation is the largest, to fund government responsibilities and operation. And from these responsibilities and government duties we can deduct what kind of taxes the governments should collect. And actually there are two types of taxes. One, the government services can be directly funded. Among these, there is a subgroup where the services cannot be measured exactly, but they can be organized into insurance schemes, and the services are called universal. Practically everyone gets the same. And however, the extent to which they use might differ. Now, what I'm talking about is pension, superannuation. At the moment, the state guaranteed pension is universal. Everyone gets almost the same. Almost. Practically, there are varying levels of taxation whether someone lives together with someone else or just alone. That might differ. However, the main idea is to provide a universal level of pension. However, the extent, the time period while an individual can enjoy pension may differ. Yes, somebody dies earlier, someone later. It's defined by other factors. I don't want to go into details with that. That's another discussion. Now, healthcare is also similar. If someone needs cancer treatment, healthcare can provide it, and regardless of the sickness, the treatments are all the same. However, yes, there are healthier people and those who get sick more often, the use of the healthcare system might differ too. But the service is called universal because practically everyone gets the same. Now, these services can be organized into governmental insurance schemes. That's how the direct funding can occur. Now, the indirect funding, where consumption cannot be metered, occurs in other state services, practically when the state provides public goods, education, infrastructure, law and order, defense, security. These are the areas practically when it is possible to show and argue that those whose income are higher use these services more often. It is difficult to show how the education might differ, but a very simple example. Typically, it is the smartest students who go to the teachers more often after class and ask additional questions. These are the students who later on become very successful with high income. Is it possible to meter how much time they use up from the teachers? No. But this is where progressive taxation should play a role. Now, it might differ to what extent progressivity should be imposed. I believe that there is a top level of taxation rate above which it's futile to impose higher tax rates because people might be disincentivized to work or they just move somewhere else. Where is this top rate? It is certainly below 50%. 45 might sound very high, but I think it is still too high, and maybe Douglas Adams in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was right. This ultimate question can be answered by 42. So yeah, 42 appears a good top tax rate, but at the moment New Zealand doesn't need that high taxation rate at all. I don't think so. Nevertheless, it's important to understand how fair the taxation system is now. Direct tax levels, government insurance schemes, and progressivity. Well, progressivity, I would say it's okay. 39% is the highest rate, yes. But there is another aspect of the taxation system where we definitely lack fairness. Let's see what this is. Now, to show you this, I have a document. I don't want to walk you through the whole document, but it included these ideas. This document was sent to the local MP here in Dunedin, who was at the time, he's still Minister for Commerce and Statistics, whatever, government enterprises, David Clark. And I had the opportunity to discuss the taxation ideas with him on the 26th of August. You can check it, it was a Friday. I remember it quite precisely because instead of 20 minutes we talked almost an hour. I will tell you the main outcome of this discussion after we finish. Well, I don't want to show you the executive summary for now, but we will come to the main recommendations later. So, in terms of direct payments, I believe that the water services are not provided properly. They should be metered, and in that case, water services could be measured, and they could be funded directly. That gives room to cancel out all the rate payments. However, this is taxes associated with personal incomes. This is an area where we can identify a gap in fairness in the New Zealand tax system. What is this? Now, New Zealand is very low on the tax wedge. Tax wedge is the measure from the gross personal incomes. If it is 50%, that means the individuals receive only 50% of their gross personal incomes. If it is 20%, they can still receive 80%. And in New Zealand, it is 19%. New Zealand is the third from below among OECD countries. I hope you can see the OECD average is roughly 35%. The higher we go, we find Belgium at the top. In Belgium it is more than 54. However, if we check these columns, we can see that New Zealand is completely blue. That means there is only personal income tax. The amber and the gray areas are social security contributions by the employees, that's the amber, and the gray is the social security contribution by employers. And in New Zealand there is none. Actually, it is not entirely true, because when employers pay 10 days sick leaves, actually that's their contribution to the healthcare system, and it is roughly 3.8% of the yearly wage. Therefore, this 19% of the New Zealand tax wedge could be a bit modified. That is how I see it. But apart from the ACC levy, which is roughly 1%, there is no social security contribution here in New Zealand. Now, this is what I call the largest gap in approaching fairness in the taxation system, because later on I will show you that when the healthcare system is roughly 75% funded directly by security contributions, that's okay. Now, if we see that the OECD average is personal income tax on average, the effective income tax rate is roughly 13%, 13%. The social security contribution by the individual is roughly 8%, and employers pay about 12% to social security. Now, we have a broad idea that this is where New Zealand underdeveloped, to be fair. Yeah, the name of this channel is Fair Policy Commentary, so yeah, we have to identify what fairness is. Okay, moving on. In terms of GST, which I believe is also kind of a progressive tax, and company tax rate, New Zealand is a bit higher above the OECD average. This is the company tax rate, and New Zealand has a 28% taxation rate. It's higher than the 21.5% OECD average. If we want to incentivize investments in New Zealand, I believe this is the area where the country might have room to decrease the company tax rate. However, voters' preferences might differ. So 28%, let's leave it as it is. But in terms of social security, New Zealand has work to do. If we compare the GST rates, this is where New Zealand's taxation system becomes interesting, because the OECD average is a bit higher than 19%. New Zealand has 15% GST rate. The highest GST is in Hungary, my home country, where I am from. However, this is where it is funny. If we compare how much GST the governments take and receive in terms of GDP percentage, New Zealand receives the same percentage as Hungary, 9.7%. How on earth is this possible? Some might say that the tax system is effective. I cannot understand why the New Zealand tax system would be effective, but the collection of GST is certainly effective. Well, I don't know the exact reason for this. However, I suspect that there is some composition effect, which means taxes are also taxed by GST. One example, the property rates are defined by councils, but individuals also pay GST on the property rates, which is tax on tax. Maybe there is also some cascade effect. That means when a corporate purchases goods and resells them, they pay GST for the purchase, and when they sell the goods, they receive GST from customers, and practically customers pay GST on the GST. That's a cascade effect. There might be some here, but I am not a tax expert in this detail. I can't tell. I suspect there is some, but I can't confirm. Okay, moving on. Now we talked about that social security contributions should be implemented here. We talked about that the income tax wedge is not high, so there is room to improve it, and the GST is yeah, in terms of GDP contribution, it's pretty high. Now, sorry. Moving back to this document, I composed various recommendations how the government should improve the tax system. Just go through in the executive summary. The fairness is defined here. One important aspect is that actual income and payment should occur when taxes are imposed. Therefore, I oppose all kinds of wealth tax or property rates, because there is no effective income in place from which people might pay the tax easily. And water services should be measured. Governments should declare that there will be no wealth tax here. They will cancel out the property rates, and they should meter water services. Now, to secure sustainability of the healthcare and benefit system, superannuation mostly, the social security contribution initially should be 11% for healthcare, 3% to superannuation, and initially it should be 1% to other welfare expenses, for example job seeker support. Now employers will be relieved from the sick leave payments, and they can pay 8% as the paid salaries on the paid salaries. Now, where does this 8% come from? It comes from we talked about 3.8% as the 10 days sick leave on average. The other 4.2% comes from the fact that I recommend that public holidays, if someone works on public holidays, they should receive 1.5 times the wage, but there should be no additional holiday payment, because the employees should decide either they work or they take the public holiday, but the two shouldn't go together. Therefore, 12 days of salary and wage payments can be saved up for employers. That's where the other 4.2% comes from. Now the dividend tax is a different animal, because at the moment the highest tax rate is 39%. Meanwhile, the corporate tax rate is 28%, and proportionately, when the corporate income becomes private income through the dividends, if the dividends are discounted by this 15.28%, that's when individuals reach the highest percentage rate of taxation. Now, okay, well, there is another two funny, actually there is another three funny new tax. One is tourism tax. The second one is local industry operation. Both of them serves local governments to fund their water services. Now, actually, if someone goes on a holiday and takes accommodation, $10 per night per person is proportionate to the water use for showering or going into spas. That's roughly the water consumption, how much they use it. It's pretty high, but this comes from the calculation of how much local governments pay on the water infrastructure at the moment. The industry rate comes from the same calculation anyway. And finally, when real estates are traded, I recommended 1% levy below $1 million, and this should be 6% if larger real estate, a mansion, is traded. This is the version what I recommend, the mansion tax. Above 1 million it should be paid, 6% should be paid. Well, someone might say that it is ridiculous. Well, governments do have an obligation to secure the transition of the ownership, and they have to register it too, and law and order and security practically defends these assets more than the smaller homes. That's the main logic. Just to show you how detailed this document was, we go to the end of it, and that's where I calculated through the economic effects of these recommendations. And that's an interesting part here. Between 2017 and 2022, social security and welfare payments increased by 71%, healthcare more than 84%. Now, the funny part, law and order, that's the police, 46.6%. So there should be a better police to protect against ram raids. Okay, we have a line called housing and community development. Housing is always the limitation of government services. In normal times, when real estate is not expensive, housing can be provided by market forces. It is a rare situation that New Zealand governments have to provide housing. However, the method how they are doing it is problematic. I will compose another video to discuss what I would recommend. Now, I discussed why the wealth tax and the capital gains tax are deceptions, and finally there's a detailed calculation about the main effects of these ideas. Altogether, the governments can save up $3.2 billion in tax. And I was very generous to the government, because actually if they charge water consumption through the meters and they charge actual consumption, the negative effect of contributing to local government expenses after cancelling the property rates, this $8.5 billion is actually mistaken, that it is here. It shouldn't be here, because water service payments should contribute to local governments for that. Now, this means altogether that the 3.2 billion and the 8.5 billion is more than 11.6 billion. That would be actually enough to fund a completely free tertiary education system. Why is it is important for me? Yeah, I like to be an academic, and it would improve academic freedom and the education to a large extent. Now, David Clark received this proposal. We discussed about it. He said it's great, but he also said he couldn't do anything about it. Yeah, he didn't dare to do anything. He couldn't stand up for it. We discussed that he would send it to David Parker, the tax minister, the revenue minister. Now, I asked him to copy me for the correspondence. I have never seen email from David Clark's office in which they might have sent this document to David Parker. I have reason to believe that never happened, but I am not cynical here, I'm just realistic. Okay, if anyone needs the document, let me know, and hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.